with Coldwell Banker. But then again, many of you know this because if you're following any of these live platforms that I'm going on right now with YouTube, Google, and Facebook, you already know that because you follow me. So good evening, and I thought I would just jump on quick. I have some things I want to share with you from a real estate perspective, but in starting out, as I always tell people, if you guys have any real estate questions or anything that you want to talk about, please jump in whenever you like. So it doesn't have to be about what I'm talking about today. If you have something that you want to know about, just let me know and I will answer that question for you best that I can. It's a fluid kind of thing here, but what I want to go over today is how to determine what your home value is currently. A lot of people want to know this, not because they're going to sell their home, but they want to know just because it's most people's largest asset. And I want to make sure that you're getting it right so that when you're looking at it, just if you're nothing more than curious, you have some solid information and you're not just relying on several of these different websites to tell you what it is when in reality, more often they're completely wrong. So, like I said, jump right in if you guys have any questions, if you want to talk about anything. If I'm going to list a home or I'm going to look at home value, I do it in a very specific way. I try to do it as much like an appraiser would, because when you go to list your home for sale, there are two types of appraisals. The first appraisal is a sale appraisal, and all they're trying to do is determine the value of the home as per contract. So if you have a contract right now to sell your home for, say, $400,000. The appraiser's only job is to go out and evaluate the home to make sure that it is indeed worth the $400,000 that you have a sale contract for, so that they can go to the bank and say, yes, if you lend the money to the buyer, it's worth 400 grand. That's all they care about. The other type of appraisal would be a home equity line of credit or a refi. In that situation, the appraiser might look at it differently and actually push the value as high as they possibly can go, because you're going to draw some money out of that equity that you have in your home to do home improvements, pay off debt, whatever it might be. But they're two completely different things. So when you're selling a home, you're never going to find out what the appraisal value is of your home from the buyer's side because it's private information. The only time you're going to hear about it is if it doesn't appraise at the value in which that contract states. But having said that, I just think it's disingenuous for some of these websites to say, we will give you a value of your home in 5 minutes. It's almost impossible to do. It's such a broad spectrum that it's really hard to say that it's accurate. Before the pandemic, I've been doing this now for 19 years. Before the pandemic, I could probably sit down with you and within inside of 5-10 minutes, I could say, hey, I think it's worth X amount of dollars. And 9 times out of 10, I was within 5, maybe 10 grand of that value. But with the way the market is now, it's completely changed. And I think you have to be able to look at all of the signs to try to figure out the closest possible value. And the reason I mentioned the appraiser is that if you're going to sell your home, the last thing you want to do is put the home up for a price that the appraiser is not going to appraise it for, because then you have a whole other problem with the buyer. So you want to get as accurate as possible. And you just can't get that. It's not like looking up a pair of shoes on Amazon. You have to have a professional sit down and go over this with you. So if you're going to look for a value of home, what I typically will do is look at it, like I said, like an appraiser. I'll look within 2 miles of your house, which is the subject property. And I'll look for homes that are similar in foundation size, year built, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and then amenities. That's how we start to weed things down to try to determine. So if you have a house that is like a comparison for yours that's 10 years newer, you might end up taking $5,000 off for each year in difference. And then you're looking at, like I said, foundation sizes, and we try to stay within the 2 miles and within 6 months, but preferably 90 days of closing. So we're looking at the closed comparable homes that are most similar to yours. But then I'm also looking at the actives and the pendings to see how much has it changed. So if you have 3 houses that sold between $375,000 and $395,000 within a mile of your home, and the current homes that are pending were the exact same home and they were priced at 420 and they're pending and it says multiple offers, then even if I come back to you with a value of $395,000, it's pretty safe to say that considering what's going on in the pending market and the lack of inventory, you've gained some equity just in the last 6 months. So it's really important that you look at all of the factors of the homes that have sold. And you can't just look at it from a standpoint of tax value, because the taxable value is really a skewed thing. I've been in situations where there's been a row of townhomes, 10 in a row, and half of them are being taxed at a higher rate than the other ones. And these aren't the end units or the ones that are larger. I'm talking about ones that are identical in square footage, amenities, size, all of that sort of thing, because the tax base can be that screwed up. So you can't just rely on something like that. It doesn't hurt to review it, but I think it's really important that you get a better feel. And what better feel can you get than looking at the sold homes and the comparables in the market around you to kind of determine what's going on right now. So a snapshot right now in time will be different than something 6 months from now. That's why you always want to keep it updated. But that's the basic way to go through and do something like that. You have to do the work. And it usually takes me about 4 to 6 hours to read through all of the comparable solds, look at the actives, look at the pendings, look at the tax data, look at all the amenities, and try to give a good solid picture of what your home is worth. And if you try to cut corners and you sign up on something where they're going to give you value in 10 minutes, I wouldn't put too much stock in that. It just doesn't make sense to me from the standpoint of common sense of getting to the correct answer. It's like trying to solve a multiplication problem and not multiplying one of the numbers. It just doesn't add up. So if you're thinking about selling, obviously in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area, give me a call. I'd be more than happy to do a market analysis for you for free, no obligation. And even if you just want to know what's going on with the value of your home because you're curious, I'm happy to do that too. It's really not a problem, and it's something that I enjoy doing because it also helps me look at big data and all these other things that we look at to determine value. Because what ends up happening is when I do some of these markets, even for people that aren't moving right now, I can find trends and I can start to see things before they happen, which helps me not only from a buyer standpoint when I'm helping people try to find a home, but also to encourage the sellers to maybe look at these different options. So that's kind of the reason behind knowing where you're at. It's no different than looking at your stock portfolio or your 401k. It's just nice to know, okay, hey, this is a really big investment I've got right now, and I'd like to kind of get an idea of where the value is, even if you're not planning on doing anything. That's pretty much it. That's kind of what I wanted to say, that it's a little bit more of an involved process than something that just happens overnight. I think that if you know what your house is really truly worth, it helps you make better decisions as well as far as where you're going to invest and what you're going to do. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, and I will be more than happy to answer anything that you may be wondering about. Market is really crazy right now in the spring here. Well, not quite spring, but it is our spring market. We're still low on inventory. We're still trying to build a portfolio for our buyers so they have more options. And so some of the things that you're hearing is true, some of it's not. Hey, Donald, good evening. How you doing? He's saying Donald's in rural Chicago, and he's saying that he's seeing the prices soar right now, and it's true almost everywhere. In Minneapolis-St. Paul right now, we are really experiencing almost like gas prices. They're going up because I think people are so frustrated in not getting a home that they're reaching or overreaching on some properties that may or may not be a good value, which goes back to the appraisal piece as well. Because like Donald, he is a loan officer. The last thing he wants to see is a bad appraisal, because that makes his job harder to try to help things go along and move along so that the buyer can actually close on the property. So that was, that's a thing that we want to try to avoid. But I think if things will balance out, what I'm really curious to see is what's going to happen with mortgage rates moving forward. I know that they went up, but then they kind of came down a little bit. And I don't know if the Fed's going to move forward on the rate change or not. And so that's going to have a lot of effect. But as we move into the spring, at least here in this part of the world, we end up starting to see a lot more homes come on the market once it gets a little bit warmer out. That seems to make all the difference in the world. Donald said interest rates are also rising, so I've encouraged my clients to buy instead of holding off if they can find a home. Yeah, that's very true. And Ira said, yeah, home prices here in New York are crazy. So everyone's experiencing it. I have several different clients, and I talked about this last week, that there's three things that people are putting into these contracts that you need to be aware of. And I'm not necessarily against using these different assets to try to get a home, but you got to be really careful what you do. The first one is they're giving up home inspections. I am 100% wholeheartedly against this. I think that's a bad idea. It's the last opportunity you have to make sure that the home that you're purchasing is what you think it is. And I'm not saying that because I think that homeowners are deceptive or not telling you the truth, but I can tell you right now that I've lived in my home for 26 years. And I'm sure there are problems with it that I'm not even aware of. That's what the home inspection brings out. A lot of small issues, no big deal. It's a used home, you're going to deal with it. But you want to make sure that there's no major issues like foundation, roof, that sort of thing. So maybe you could write it in a different way. What's been working for me is putting in an inspection, but not making it contingent on the inspection. So you still have the right to back out if you found something that was really bad. But at the same time, the seller can breathe a sigh of relief that you're not going to come back and nitpick at them over all these small little things because they're worried that because they're paying, as a buyer paying more, you're going to come back and hammer them. The second one was an escalation clause where it says, look, we'll pay $2,000 more or 5,000 or 10,000 more than your highest offer. All you have to do is give us a redacted contract. For those of you that aren't familiar with what that is, it's basically the highest offer that they received, but they can redact it or black out the names of the buyers, but you can still see the terms so you know that they are indeed telling you the truth. The escalation clauses can work. There are several that will be like, well, great, they're willing to pay me $5,000 more than my highest offer. Great, I'll take it. But then there are other sellers who are going to say, well, if they really wanted the house that bad, why are they doing it this way? Why don't they just come in and make your best offer right away and call it a day, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that either. It just depends on how the sellers are going to view it, and everyone's different. Third one is a guarantee appraisal gap. This is the one that bothers me the most because it can put you in a financial stronghold if you're not careful. And what essentially it is you're saying, let's say I'm going to write, or your house is listed for $350,000. I, as a buyer, I'm going to write an offer for $50,000 over. All right, so right away, that's probably going to catch some of you going, oh my God, $50,000. Yeah, it's a hell of a lot of money. I'm not saying you have to do that, but there are some that are selling for 10, 20, 30, 50 grand or more over, depending on the area and what the house is and all that. But let's say you say, right, here's an offer on your house for $400,000. If the appraisal comes in lower than the sales price of $400,000, we will make up the difference in cash. The problem is you're also banking at that point that it's going to at least appraise for $350,000. Well, what if there's a problem and it appraises at $330,000? I don't think it's likely, but let's say it does. Well, then not only are you bringing $50,000, now you're bringing $70,000 to close, as well as your down payment, your closing costs. So the point is, at what point is it no longer cost effective to purchase that property? And it can put you in a really bad financial position. So before you use that type of a gap clause, you really want to know what your numbers are, and you want to know what your house payments are ahead of time. So worst case scenario, so you can write in other language in that gap clause that will limit the amount of money that you would put out, and that would be something that I would suggest. So that's kind of the stuff that's going on right now, and that's where it all ties back to the value of the house. It's hard to determine the value at times when the market keeps going up, up, up so quickly, like, Donald and Ira had said earlier, because at the end of the day, the closest I'm going to get for you to make sure that it's a truthful, honest answer is to sit down and look at all of the data, but then also show it to you and say, here, this is why I think what I think. You may not agree with me, but at least you'll have all of the information in front of you that you can do to determine that. I can't tell you how many times I've been on listing appointments where I'm up against other real estate agents, and I find out that I'm one of the only people that actually looked up all of the sold comps and did all of the work. Several of the other ones who showed up for the listing just kind of made up a number or waited for the seller to tell them what they want to sell it for. That can really kind of come back to be a problem for you. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of why you want to do it and how you want to go about it. I really appreciate you guys jumping on. I haven't been doing this many of these. I'm trying to get rolling again. So thanks for watching, and thanks for asking questions and chiming in with comments. It really makes this a lot easier to do. I hope you guys have a super week. And as always, if any of you know anyone that needs help buying or selling in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help out if I can. Hope you have a wonderful week. Like I said, be safe, be careful, and I'll see you soon.